Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday morning. We hope that you are having a fantastic day. I am the founder and CEO of Elevate Equity. My name is Derek Clifford. We're so glad to have you here this morning. Today, we're going to be talking about a really important topic, which is underwriting. What is it? How is it done? And how is it approached from a multifamily point of view? Many of you out there may already have an idea of how it's done with single families, where you look at the income coming in and the outgo going out, and then take your loan balance after that and start calculating whether or not it makes sense to hold this property or not. But with multifamily, it's a little bit more nuanced. There's a little bit more to it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kind of explain what that is. And we're going to start with the top by explaining what is underwriting in general. Why even do it? So many of you guys already know the answer to that question, but underwriting is essentially obtaining what the objectives are, which is net operating income, cap rate, internal rate of return, and cash on cash for the investors and for you. And so by doing the underwriting process, you're checking to make sure that the deal has the potential and that the business plan that you have for the property is actually executable and would achieve the results that you're looking for. So you're basically checking everything. With the underwriting, you're taking your business plan, you're doing what if scenarios, you're trying to determine what will happen to the property if you do it yourself, or if you take over the property and you start running it the way that you want to run it, okay? So the underwriting process is really, it's kind of a combination of an art and a science. So we're going to touch today on how that's done. We're going to talk about what part of it is art and what part of it is science. And we're going to kind of also walk you through the process as well, because it is definitely a process and it keeps evolving. As you learn more information about the property, you put it into your underwriting to see what happens to your model. So the best way to explain it would be in a multifamily situation, it's a model, right? It's living, it's breathing. As your partners give you more input or as the broker gives you more input, you're always updating the underwriting to see how the projections for how you're going to operate the property will change the performance, which means what kind of cash on cash returns you're going to get and how it's going to perform for the investors and for you as well. So let's first start with screening. So in the main underwriting process, there's generally two steps, okay? Because if you imagine yourself as this big, great, fantastic multifamily operator, right? And you're looking for deals and you're always looking for investment opportunities, there's always two stages. The first stage is the screening process. First, you're going to look at something and you're going to see, that's worth screening. So what you do is you look at the property's offering and you determine whether or not it's something worth exploring more. Because in general, as you start working in the multifamily space, you're going to be getting a lot of opportunities coming your way, or at least you should. You should be getting a lot of properties to look at. And you have to find a way to be able to pare it down so that you're not spending your entire day just underwriting things and then finding out at 2 hours into it that you actually have underwritten a property that just doesn't make any sense at all. And the broker is asking for something really high. So it's just not gonna make any sense. So you generally should screen first to make sure whether that it's a property that is worth you going into any further. So with the help of a few mentors, I've been able to come up with the screening process. So we're going to start with the screening process first. We're going to go through it really quickly, and then we're going to jump into how I approach underwriting so that maybe you can model that for yourself as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen right now. So you should be able to see, let me see here. Let me get the screen share going. All right, so you should be able to see my screen right now, which is kind of like a screening process spreadsheet that I've kind of set up with the help of a lot of mentors, right? So the first thing that you're going to want to look at is the area's median income, okay? So wherever your property is, you can use a free resource tool like richblockspoorblocks.com, and you can bring up this tool and basically find out what type of income levels were in the area that you're looking to buy your property based on 2010 to 2016 census data. So knowing that this data is it's definitely out of date for sure. It's because it's almost 10 years old. Keep that in mind as well when you're looking at this data. But in general, if you can see a median household income above $30,000 to $35,000, depending on where you're at, that's generally a good sign. It means that a lot of the renters can support paying rents for you. So that'll be something that we'll discuss a little bit later on as well in the underwriting process. But in general, the more the people make in the area, the better it's going to be for you to be able to collect on those rents. So that's one thing to look at. The next thing is to look at the annual population growth rate. You can buy a program called ESRI, right, which will give you the population growth rate. And I think the census data for 2020 is also coming out soon. So you should be able to tap into that somewhere online. And then use World Population Review. That will show you the year-by-year growth of a certain market. So if you go onto that site, worldpopulationreview.com, I believe, or you can just Google that, it should be able to pull up how the population has grown over the years. And there's other websites as well that can give you that too. But you want to see that your year-by-year population growth is higher than the national average. And this is something that I've discussed already before on the market selection. But that's good too. And then USA.com, you can use that for school ratings. And then you want to also look for flood zones. And then a big thing for me is crime. So you can use this from Trulia. You basically go on Trulia, you type in an address that's near where your property is, and then just look at the map and kind of see how engulfed in crime the property is that you're looking at, whether it's directly in the middle of it, or if it's far away from it, or if it's at like a transition zone. That just depends on your strategy, and you have to make sure that whatever you're doing matches with your strategy. Okay. Then you can use crime. You can just go to citydata.com and you can pull the crime data. And this happens to be something for Indianapolis. So you can see here that the crime has been relatively steady and actually declining in the last 5 years or so. Then you have spot crime, which is super cool. So Trulia has this information as well, but if you go on spot crime, like it actually visually shows you what type of crime was in the area or done in the area in which you're planning to buy property. So you want to consider like violent crime. You definitely don't want to be buying in a place where people have been murdered, or there's lots of pattern of really bad types of stuff going down. That's a really bad sign of buying something in the wrong area. And then, of course, you want to look at rental comps as well. So once you're finished with that, the screening process for looking at the property itself, looking at it by just basically looking at the crime levels and everything else considered, is that something that you want to do? That's the first level. Is this somewhere where you'd want to buy a property and hold for at least 3 years or something? So that's something that you've got to consider in part of your business plan. Okay. So next thing that I wanted to cover with you was at the end of the screening process. Okay, there is this. You've got the 2-minute analysis, and something that I should also point out too is that I use Michael Blanc's syndicated deal analyzer. I highly recommend it. It's the one tool that I found that I really love. It's programmable. It has different scenarios, and this has a tab in there called the 2-minute analysis, and I love this thing. So if you're looking at a property, right? Once you've passed the screening process for the property itself, which means the property's condition is okay, where it's located is fine, the market is good, you have all of these things ready to go, right? And you've taken a look at the roof from Google Street View, and you've just done like kind of a drive around there, and you've done everything that you could to say, okay, this looks like something that's actually worthwhile for me to consider going further into underwriting and finding a price and terms to be able to offer the broker. Okay, that's the first step. So I'm assuming that you passed that. The next is to do what's called the 2-minute analysis. And this can be also part of your screening as well. But basically what it is you take some very basic info from the marketing package, which is the gross annual potential income. So I have here, a package here that was from a long time ago. So this property is called the Suncrest, and it's long since sold and everything in Indianapolis. But here you can see kind of like the package. And inside the package, you have a 12-month trailing total. And so you can use this gross annual potential income to just type in right here. Then you want to keep a 10% economic and physical vacancy, just because that's a conservative assumption. And then you also want to bring in a 50% annual expense ratio, right? Then you're going to need to know what the market cap rate is. So this takes a little bit of time to understand, but you can also look at the marketing package or ask the broker, right, what this market cap rate is. And once you determine that, it will give you a valuation of the property. And if they're asking for $20 million on this particular property, or, let's say that this valuation ended up, let's chop off a number here just to be a little bit more relatable to some folks who are starting out. Let's say that, you come up with a number of around $1.3 million, but the marketing package, they want $2 million. Well, that's probably not going to work out very well unless the broker has come down on expectations, or you're able to ask them what the whisper price is. And the whisper price is somewhere around this realm, okay? You also have the option of going ahead and submitting an LOI anyway, or submitting like a letter that says, here's what I'm intending to offer to the broker based on a really low number. But odds are, if you do that, you're probably not going to be taken seriously, and it's just not worth doing that, just because you're going to have to spend more time on the LOI and figuring out like what it is that you're actually going to offer and putting together loan assumptions and all of that good stuff, okay? So that's what I would do first. So I would do this 2-minute analysis, plug in the info here, keep everything else the same. I would keep the 10% economic physical vacancy and a 50% expense ratio because that's generally what a property will do over time if it's run really well. And that, of course, is you. You will be running the property very well because you're very well prepared and you're watching this video. So that being said, that is the approach for screening, and that pretty much covers all of the beginning part of it. So if you've made the determination that your valuation is well within, like, I don't know, 20% or 10% of what the broker is expecting to receive in terms of offers, now it's time for you to do underwriting. It's time for you to go past the screening level and get into the underwriting itself, okay? And in order to do that, we're going to use Michael Blanc's tool as well. At least that's what I use. There's other tools out there that are fantastic. Brad Sumrock has a great tool. Vinny Chopra, my old mentor, he uses something that he's built over the years. And you could even build something as well that you've built. And I think Jake and Gino, they have their own tool as well. So you're welcome to use any of those tools, whatever is comfortable to you. But for me, I like to use Michael Blanc's tool. So we're going to be using Michael Blanc's tool here to kind of step through what my process is in underwriting, okay? So the very first thing that I do when looking at underwriting is I'm going to look at this scenario page. So we're going to go ahead and expand this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and make the size a little bit bigger so you can see. So hopefully that is clear to you. Okay, the first thing that I do is once I figure out where it is that my property is located, I'm going to go in here and start doing a target rent analysis. So really high level, I'm going to go into apartments.com and I'm going to pull up the neighborhoods. I'm going to pull up the information on apartments.com. You can actually go into apartments.com and pull neighborhood information, pull neighborhood data, and then drop in the square footage and the rents that you see for each area. And then I'm going to have like a secondary market that's right next to the property. So let's say that your property is right on the border of two or a bunch of different areas. I'm going to put in a neighborhood description from apartments.com just to give a little bit of shading of what it is. And then I'm going to drop in and literally copy and paste these cells straight from apartments.com directly into my tool, and then determine what kind of weight I want to give each area. So if it's 50-50, then that way, you know, I'll be able to kind of say, okay, well, this area is kind of, it's half in this area and half in that area, or it's mostly this area and a little bit of influence from this area. And you'll see what I mean as you get involved in the underwriting, that sometimes areas will influence each other and there's like a transition type of thing happening. And I built a tool out that allows me to basically say, okay, well, you know, if we end up like, if this area is squarely inside of one area, then that's great. But if it's in a transition zone, we can quantify how much effect is coming from each of these areas and what type of market rents to expect, okay? And then it's basically in here, I'm trying to figure out what the income is, what the fundamentals are. How many units are in studios, bedrooms, you know, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. All of that stuff is all given into the offering memorandum. And then the square footage here, because generally what I like to determine is what is the dollar per square foot offering for the type of property that we're in. And so I like to look at that versus, you know, what the market will command based on the apartments.com data, okay? And then the broker's OM or the broker's package should also have a lot of that information too. They should also have market rent. But I would just say that when you're doing underwriting, just check everything. Make sure that what you're getting from the broker, because that's not always the whole truth. I just like to verify everything myself and making sure that you have everything that you need in order to underwrite this and understand everything yourself. So especially when you're getting started and you're just looking at a market from the beginning, it's great to know this information so that you can figure out what apartments.com, what actual rents are out there right now that people are getting is going into the underwriting, what you can actually achieve given the finishes and the class of the property and everything like that, okay? All right. So after you have the income side all taken down, okay, a lot of the things in the top here, you're going to be working mainly in this scenario one. Scenario one is, at least in Michael Blanc's tool, it is what the marketing package suggests. And you just want to have that as like a baseline so that when you're looking side by side next to the other scenarios that you're going to be underwriting soon, you want to have like a something that kind of ties you back to whatever the broker and the seller is telling you is coming in. So you have a fixed asking price or purchase price, right? Then you have the number of units, down payment percent assumption, which you can usually put as 25 or 20% down, depending on whether the property is stabilized or not. So there's a few nuances there. You want to put in some operating reserves, like you can change that right away if you want to. And that's something that you can do a little bit later on, you can toy with. Then you have this gross potential income. So that is this number that we looked at before over here, right? So in the broker's scenario, you're going to type in that number right there, right? That's the annual income that you're going to get. And then of course, you're going to copy all of the vacancy and concessions, everything that they have in their sheet, as well as here in this marketing package section. So all the expenses that they have, for instance, in here, like you can look out here, you see taxes. So you just copy the real estate taxes piece and you put that in here as well. So in this particular case, it would be 98,000. So you type in 98,000 here in real estate taxes, and then everything else you just kind of like categorize and make sure at the end that your total expenses, the sum equals what is in the marketing package. And then you have your scenario one completely set away. Okay. The second scenario that I like to run in here is my version, which means, okay, let's say that the offering memorandum, the OM, doesn't have the right stuff in there. Like, let's say that we think, for instance, that there's no legal fees, or basically any legal fees in the operating package, but we know that there's going to be some eviction somewhere, or we know that insurance may actually cost a little bit more than what they say it is, because they maybe have locked in their insurance rate in the past. And then also, we know, for instance, that property taxes will probably get reassessed either this year or next year. So property taxes will need to go up as well. So this is our version. This is where we actually expect to run based on a desktop review and based on your experience and your knowledge of what's happening in the area, and also based on some rules of thumb. Like, there's some great mentors out there. Vinny has really helped me out a lot. He's create a spreadsheet that has a lot of rules of thumb. For instance, advertising is generally about $100 per door per year. So you can even type that in as a formula. So if you want to say it's $100 per door, which is 50 units, right, per year times 12, that'll be let's see, equals 50 units times 100. That'll be about $5,000 per year. That's what the advertising expense is going to be for that, based on his experience. And then he has a bunch of rules of thumb for all of these other things, like insurance is generally about $400 a door. Real estate taxes, you've got to do your own research. You can go in and look at like what the property's taxes are. Legal is generally about, I'd say $50 to $100 per door, although that might be going up recently because lawyers charge more money sometimes. And then general admin is a range. It's generally, depending on the type of property, you could go anywhere between 100 to 150 a door, right? And then there's other rules of thumbs in here, but generally you're going to want to put down what you think your reality of operating the property is going to be. And hopefully it comes out to be higher than a 50% expense ratio. That's the point. Then you have a stabilized scenario, right? This one is, okay, let's say you take your version, but you're not going to operate it the same way that the operator had, right? Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to make some improvements. You're going to go in there and you're actually going to inject some extra capital. So you're going to add some reserves, some operating reserves, or some repairs. So let's say you're going to add $250,000 worth of repairs, but in turn, that's going to help you operate more efficiently later on, right? So how do you model that, right? And so you have an extra variable in here to pull to be able to say, okay, well, this is how I really want to do this thing. And in the end, I think we'll have probably less property management issues because, we're going to have less maintenance. So we can bump down the maintenance because we're going to be doing a lot of like toilet repairs or, upgrades of the countertops or cabinets or whatever. and the turnover may be a little bit less as well. So you can see how like what your imagination will project out into, and also what your partners and what your experience tells you will happen if you inject extra capital, or if you tweak some things here and there, right? Or if you change the loan amount, right? Like let's say you actually do a 20% down payment, right? This scenario will give you the opportunity to say, okay, what's going to happen if we do something different from what we think is going to happen operationally at the property, okay? And then, of course, over here, you have this fourth scenario to play with. It's an additional one. So let's say that you have like 2 levels of rehab, like one in this scenario 3, you're just doing cabinets and countertops, and how that's going to change the behavior of the tenants and whether they're going to stay or go is something you can think about and discuss with your partners. Or there's the fourth scenario, which is, oh, we're going all out. We're going to replace the countertops, the cabinets. We're going to go in and we're going to replace, do some common area improvements. We're going to add a grill into the main area. We're going to, repaint all of the buildings. We're going to do all of that. And so having this type of scenario can help you figure out, okay, what is the best business case to go forward with, and what is our best offer at, right? And you have all of these numbers. And let's say that if you wanted to offer on this particular case where you're just doing the cabinets and the countertops, and you just want to take this number and you say, well, because of this, like, I don't know, I think I may need a little bit of a discount. So I'm going to go in at, I'm going to offer a little bit over asking. And then this one, I definitely need a little bit of a discount. So I'm going to do, this much. So I'm going to do this much here. These are all things to consider, okay? And so by doing the underwriting process, first you're checking your income to come in, you're looking at the expenses, and you're figuring out what's going to happen at a high level. And then, of course, there's a whole nother layer just to setting up these scenarios. But after this, you've got to look at like what you're going to do with the with refinancing, if possible. You want to look at the metrics and make sure that like your the equity that your members are getting, it's an 80-20 split. So do the returns make sense for them? Does it make sense to offer on this deal? And what I really like about this tool is you can run like what scenario you want to run here. Like this is, for instance, the third scenario. This is the one where we're just doing cabinets and countertops. And then this one, number 2, if you remember from scenarios, this is basically just keeping things the way that they are right now. And then, of course, after you've taken a look in here and you've tweaked some of these numbers a little bit, this is the science part of it. Now you're going to go back into the P&L and the operation, because everything that we've done in the scenarios piece was just for the year 1, right? Now we have to deal with like what's going to happen in the next couple of years in year 5. And this is stuff that you can do. Like you can play with these rent escalation assumptions. Like you can change this to 3% if you want to, and then everything else changes to that. Or you can type in your own formulas or your own growth, like say this is 3, but then this one's 4 and this one's 2. You can do that all in here, right? And then everything else is kind of given out from there. Then, of course, you're going to plug in some acquisition costs, which you know of, or you should know already. There's a pretty good example here that's given. And then this is where some of the magic happens in this wonderful tool, is you're able to basically determine, okay, are we going to do any cash out refis in year 2 or 3? Can we do that? And if so, it automatically builds that scenario into the returns and helps you figure out whether or not it makes sense to refinance at the end of year 1 or 2 or 3, and then sell at the end of year 5 or 6 or 7, based on the information that's here in the profit and loss statement that's generated from the information based on the P&L earlier before. So a lot of information, a lot of stuff that you can play with. And there definitely is a lot to take in. And that's why I said this is like an art and a science at the same time, because as you change and tweak all of these things, things can drastically go really high. Like the projections can be really high or they can be really low. And so if you don't know what you're doing here, you could be basically promising some things to the investors that you may not be able to achieve. And so I really recommend that people who are getting started with underwriting take some time doing this, right? Pull some underwriting materials or pull some information from LoopNet or wherever you can find it, and just do some practice. Like just practice underwriting a few of them. Going all the way through, even though it doesn't meet your screening criteria at all. I highly recommend that you go in there and actually try it out, right? To give yourself a little bit of practice, so that when you are ready to start making offers or working with people who are making offers, you understand how they got to where they got. And you can ask intelligent questions about what it is that the business plan is. So again, the underwriting is basically an assumption. It's a wrap of all of the important items that make up an offer, including the business plan, what is currently in the property's area dynamics, whether or not it's something that needs to be worked on or it's located in a poor area. It incorporates everything and basically spits out ultimately a cash on cash return and a final IRR number that's projected for both you and your investors as an operator. So I hope that was useful for you. And if it is, please like and subscribe and let us know like what it is that we can do to help you understand more about the multifamily world. And many of you out there probably already understand underwriting. And so I want to hear from you as well. Like, what am I missing here? Is there anything that maybe I didn't cover or something that needs to be discussed that isn't? I definitely want to hear about that in the comments so that I'm not leading anyone astray. So anyway, hope everything is great. Thank you guys for listening. And please visit us at elevateequity.org to learn more about the books that we have, the podcasts, and everything else that we've got out there. We definitely want to hear from you, and we want to add value to as many people as we can, help get them away from their full-time jobs to unlock all 3 degrees of freedom: the time, the location, and the money freedom that everyone has potential to achieve. That being said, I'm going to sign off. Thank you guys and have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy your Saturday, and we'll